In other words, you can ask the question the other way. What would happen if we educated 80, 90, or 95% of black students, of Latino students, who are the majority of the New York City population now, if we educated them in such a way that they could score as well or outscore white folk? Ultimately, then, that would mean that we as people would replace white folk in the New York City occupational structure. At this point, you would probably see some racism in this town that you thought did not exist. It would be at this point that blatant racism would rise again, to the point as it happened in the South, where people would say, well, I don't really care what kind of educational background you have and what kind of qualifications you have. This is a white man's job. And this is for white folks first. But you see, we don't have to get to that nasty scenario because we drop out before we what? Get there. So it saves the city and it saves the nation some very nasty racial confrontations. That is one of the reasons I argue then that this city and this nation, as much as it talks about preventing dropouts, as much as it talks about improving the educational quality of our children and of our people, never seems to be able to do anything about it. It never seems to be able to change anything. So we have a lot of bleeding hearts about how we wish and how we are trying to see to it that our people are educated and that the disadvantaged are educated, and you get great news pieces about some great teaching method or some great educational approach that can resolve educational problems, but then after a month or two you never hear of the great teaching approach again. In other words, then, we have to keep in mind that it is not in the cards, as far as Europeans are concerned, for African people to ever be their equals. As much conversation as you hear about equality and about, multiculturalism and all of the other stuff you hear floating in the air, the essential thing is that Europeans and whites have no intentions of moving African people from the positions of servitude, and they have no intentions of giving up their power to regulate our opportunities as a people and to regulate those opportunities in their own interest as a people. The other thing that we have to look at too is the fact that we as African people, we are a very moral people, you see. We are really moral. People talk about so-called criminality in the African community. But when you really look at us as a people, we tend to be very moral, and we tend to think that people should do the right thing just because it's right. And if people are in positions of responsibility, they should just take those responsibilities seriously and do and act toward those responsibilities in an equitable manner without regard to race, color, or creed. But this is not a reality at all. When you look at the reality of life, people belonging to different classes, people having different social, political, and economic power operate in their own class interest. No matter how moral it may be, and no matter how moral it may sound, there is no way that the Europeans who have the economic and political power and the advantages that they have today are going to voluntarily give them up to you as African people in the name of some kind of moral principle or in the name of Christianity. And I'm saying this because we think that professionals belonging to a particular ethnic group are going to overlook their ethnicity, that professionals belonging to particular class backgrounds are going to overlook their class background, and that they are going to provide equal opportunity for others. You must recognize, ladies and gentlemen, that class struggles and struggles between groups is a reality. You young people here today, I will assure you that by the time you get 80 or 90 years old, there will still be ethnic struggles. There will still be struggles between ethnic groups. Do not deceive yourself and do not fall for the propaganda that someday, some way, little white boys and little white girls are going to be holding hands and people are going to be measured by the content of their character. You got another thought coming. The struggles between races and groups, the struggles between classes and groups has been here since the very beginning, and they will continue to be here. The only people foolish enough to believe that such an age is going to come are black folk. And this is one of the reasons why today they're on the bottom of the class and economic and political ladders, because they actually believe somehow a miracle is going to occur where folk are going to look at them and not see the color of their skin. If you think that there's going to occur, you got another thought coming. If you're keeping up with the news today, if you're looking at what's going on in all over the world, in Yugoslavia, where you have so-called ethnic cleansing operations going on, where the Serbs are fighting against the Muslims and the Croats and so forth. If you look at this situation, here are people who lived under Russian communism for almost 40 years. And under Russian communism, they were taught the ideals of classlessness, that there is really no difference in classes, that there should be no class differences, there should be no race differences, there should be no differences based on religion and so forth. And communism is about reducing differences based on class, religion, and creed. And the Russians ruled over Yugoslavia, ruled over Czechoslovakia, Armenia, and many other nations and brought them into what we call the Soviet Empire. Now, as soon as Russia fell apart, what happened? These groups fell into ethnic conflicts. And now you are reading and hearing about the ethnic conflicts that are going on in Herzegovina, in Sarajevo, in Yugoslavia. Even if we look today in our homeland of Africa, we will still see struggles within our African nations between ethnic groups. Ethnic struggles and class struggles are realities. And until we recognize that these are realities and they are realities that we have to confront and deal with, we will be victimized by the realities that we seek to deny. And to a great extent, the thrust of this country has been to get us as an African people to deny reality, has been to get our youth so caught up in music, and so caught up in clothes, and so caught up in wishful thinking, and so caught up in multiculturalism that they will not recognize the realities that are going on in the world. As I often tell college classes, you talk about multiculturalism in the classroom, and you're singing other group songs, and you're learning to respect other groups and other races. And I ask them, where are the multicultural grocery stores in your neighborhoods? Where are there blacks and Koreans owning the grocery stores? Where are there blacks and Koreans owning the vegetable markets? Where are there blacks and Latinos owning stores and businesses? Where are there blacks and Arabs owning? Where is the multiculturalism that you talk about so much in these schools and in these colleges in real life? When you walk out of these doors and you're taught by multicultural teachers, you're taught by white teachers, and you're taught by teachers from other ethnic groups, but when you walk out of that door, you see essentially one group of people, one group of ethnic people owning your neighborhoods, owning your vegetable markets, owning your businesses, controlling your community economically. So the reality of the school is not the reality of the world. The glorious sounds of Martin Luther King's speeches are not the realities of the world. And you must come to terms with the realities of the world. And the music that you hear and the hip hop and the